Hi, I'm Chris from Airwindows, and hey, at the time of you watching this, you can download Airwindows Meter. This is the most recent version of it, and I'm going to show you some things about it now. This is my mix/mastering guide meter, and the idea is a tool that'll help you out in ways that other meters and tools that you could get might not really do. So let's have a look. Here we have meter, and if I shift click on it, I can make it start going. The little line moves across, and you put audio in and then watch what it does. This top meter is peak loudness. Then there's a slew meter and a zero cross meter, but it's all working on the same information. And let's give it some information. You might recognize this song. The sort of rock thing I did. Now you can see that it's drawing a bunch of blue dots. These blue dots, and what it shows here, means that all of the peaks register as loud. That's more or less why I mixed that one the way that I did. And it's been fairly popular with people. People seem to like this track. That would have a lot to do with why, although you can see just barely there's little hints of green down here. Shows up a little bit larger. Green is dark. Green is more low frequency information rather than pure brightness. Here is a clip indicator. This has been made to be kind of loud. It's chopping off the very top of the possible loudness. The peaks are in fact being clipped. And the brightness is usually not too much, but this little red line here at the bottom of this meter means that it's able to do some overslewing, meaning that it's going brighter than it really needs to be. And then this zero cross meter shows you where the low frequency information is, which is mostly within the range of 240 hertz. Right at the beginning, it goes a little bit lower. You might want to pay attention to what hits around 40 hertz because that's very popular for dance music, EDM type stuff. And lastly, these charts are showing three different factors. The blue line is the overall loudness of what all the peaks are doing. RMS doesn't enter into this. I don't even show it to you anymore, other than RMS dictates the size of these dots here. The red meter is the novelty of what happens. See how it's moving up here and then it levels out? That's because the original pattern was just the drums and then the band kicked in. That caused it to be novelty. The arrangement of the peaks that you see here shifted from this pattern to this pattern, and that registered as novelty, and then it kind of stayed the same, so it drifted down again. The final score follows a combination of all these things, including whether the brightness or the bass, the low frequenciness, dominates. And again, the bass is really coming across in the zero cross meter. What we're talking about with low frequenciness is more whether the peaks are darker, meaning the peak energy that's allowed to be in the track, is it happening without enough slew information to balance it with brightness? And speaking of brightness, let's bounce over to a different track. We'll reset the meter, and here we have something that I did as the console LA mix and mistakenly made it way too bright. You'll hear that, but also look at what it does on the meter. I thought this was great stuff at the time. Did you want your very soul to fly? What you can see here is that these are red dots rather than the blue dots. That means the brightness, and you can show it on the slew brightness meter, is going into overslew. That's when the slews are so far up that they're crossing the top of this meter and registering down here in the bottom. You'll also note that the slews are showing on the zero cross meter, and it's going way higher. What these numbers mean is this here is 40 hertz for bass. Then there's a 200 hertz area where sound generally tends to center. And then up here, this is 2K. At any point when a dot shows up all the way here, the entire measurement period for checking out the peaks and everything, there was nothing lower frequency than about 2K during the entire period. And normally you're not supposed to go that bright. It's obnoxious sounding. And this track is obnoxious sounding. But what I can do is I can skip ahead to a different track, classic old Alien Kittens that we all know about, and that is more bassy, and you'll see what that does now. Get it going again. Switch over to Alien Kittens. See how the high frequencies, there's still some of them. It's still capable of being bright, even over bright. But there's just not as much of it happening, because a lot of the sounds in here are more dark. So when we look at the peak meter, what we see is that it's covering sort of the full range of it. And we've got some clips. This one's a little louder, so it's going fully to the maximum and beyond it a little tiny bit. All of the low frequency stuff is sitting on the bottom of the slew meter because slew has to do with brightness. And so here we've got this little cloud of red dots. They're not that densely concentrated here, but a fair number of them extend even past that point. You'll find with a lot of classic hit records, you'll make a little cloud of red dots here when it has that kind of 80s sparkly sound, but they don't tend to go this far. They don't tend to spike that much. That's more like a post-90s digital audio workstation kind of sound. So you might want to suppress this kind of stuff. There's ways of doing that. And then the zero cross meter for Alien Kittens, a track that people also seem to enjoy, is showing just a lot of energy down here, right down to about 40 hertz, but not really any farther down than that. And not really a lot of stuff way up here. This is a fairly good balance as far as mixes go. And the meter will show you that. And the meter will also show you a letter grade for kind of hit recordness, where it starts with the loudness. It includes the amount of change in the pattern that you see here. In this, like Alien Kittens doesn't really do that. It doesn't really change its pattern, so there's not a lot of variety there. And then it'll also subtract the amount by which this tone is unbalanced, where bright and dark don't really match. Because if you have something that's just super loud, it doesn't have much that's either bright or dark, and you can get a high score off of that. But if you have a bunch of brightness, or if you have a bunch of darkness, like some old 70s records, it's going to cut down on the hit record score, as it were. And we can have a look at some fairly recent work that I've done. This is the same thing that I demonstrated to tape 8 with. It's just some bass and drums and guitars in my studio, which is as good as I've been able to get it so far. And so this is how good I've been able to get it so far. It's going to kick in a moment, and you'll see this is kind of a lot of blue dots. That means it has that loud sound to it. And the zero cross is showing you a picture where those blue dots are kind of, the red dots are scattered throughout, the green dots are scattered throughout. With the Slew Brightness, you can see what's where. And with this, you can see also the brightness goes kind of loud. The lows are not so much, but what I did with this, I put it into 2-tape 8. So watch this. We'll skip over. Oh, sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Here's the 2-tape 8 version. It's balancing into the low frequencies more evenly. High frequencies are not going into overslew. And what we have here is what this meter considers to be a hit record sound, or at least as good as it gets so far. And you can see that in the zero cross meter, we've got still low frequencies. The bright versus dark is balancing perfectly now. The symbol being hits a bunch of these red dots, but it doesn't get too excessive as far as overslew is concerned. And you can more or less see where the lows are. And you can normally find kick drums around here on the zero cross meter, and it'll do that stuff for you. And you might ask, what business do I have claiming that this is a AA hit record sound? Yeah, it's got that sort of old school sound, but is that the only thing to care about, is whether you can make like butt rock noises? No. Check this out. Granted, the first example that I'm going to give is not really defeating the butt rock idea. I ran some records through this. I didn't just put my own music through it. That's just what I'm playing, because when I'm making these videos, it's easier to just use my own stuff. It won't get content ID'd or whatever. I ran Van Halen through it. This is a whole bunch of tracks that I used, and the top 4 are the hit records that I've got. Red is top 10 hit, orange is top 25 hit, and yellow is top 100 hit. So the hits in this collection sorted themselves to the top of the hit record score. There's a couple of exceptions, like Panama didn't rate all that high, although CA is perfectly fine. And You Really Got Me was a hit, although it was quite low down. However, that's a cover. And you might think that's interesting, that this meter now sorted these to the top of the thing, even though it doesn't know it doesn't know who David Lee Roth is. It doesn't know what a note is. It doesn't hear anything more than what you'd hear if you were playing the music through my plugin Silhouette. And what Silhouette does is it replaces the sound with noise, with the dynamic pattern of what the sound is. And it emphasizes the peak content of that so that you can still hear the fluctuations of the beats and things. This meter doesn't know any better than if it was listening to Silhouette, and still it's able to do this. But you might say sorting these Van Halen tracks into rough order of popularity on the top 40 might not be very impressive. But it did more impressive things when I threw all the Yes songs at it, because with the Yes songs, I could sort it by platinum albumness. 90125 went triple platinum. Fragile went double platinum. Close to the Edge, and also Yes songs, went platinum. And Relayer went gold, and Drama went silver. Time in a Word is kind of a special case because it didn't chart, and it scores both in the very top and the very bottom of this. This chart is all over the place with that. I also didn't get anything from the Yes album, so that might throw this all into chaos, but check this out. It has sorted the Yes tracks off of these albums roughly by the number of platinum sales each produced. The one that did triple platinum Mostly goes to the high, although the track Leave It went to the middle of the rating. Fragile, sorted up to the top, then close to the edge, and Yes Songs. Then Relayer goes down, and then Drama with Tempest Fugit, which I wanted to have a copy of, down to the bottom there. And then on the very bottom, there's a cover, and then a Long Distance Runaround the Fish from Yes Songs, which maybe it got confused because there's long periods of silence in that one, so it's not really quite a hit record arrangement. This meter figured this stuff out on its own. I didn't tell it to do this. It does this with all of the different sounds. Now, that's very impressive, and it sounds like it's capable of predicting how much money you will make off of your music based on how high of a score it gets. It's not quite like that. Here's Genesis. Genesis didn't work out that way at all. What Genesis showed was something interesting, which is that the very first album to hit for them, Nursery Crime, has two of the highest scoring tracks. And then fairly close behind that is the quadruple platinum Toys cover Genesis album, although it also has a couple of examples way down here because they were so dynamic at this time that it doesn't have enough energy to qualify on the hit record meter. The stuff like Just a Job to Do an Illegal Alien happens to be just loud enough to show it what's going on. And then the other stuff is more scattered. And there's this wide expanse across 5 albums where they were just able to chart and where the stuff just shows up on the meter ranking. It will still tell you things like, this Genesis track, say Ken Utility and the Coastliners or whatever, or better yet, something like Los Endos Ripples, Battle of Epping Forest. You might be able to throw some high frequencies on there. They ended up remixing this stuff to put it on to CDs. And there's a reason. The original records are pretty dark, although people still enjoy them. But yeah, their very first stuff scored super high in the meter. Well, I also checked out Eagles. Now, I really can't show Eagles on a stream or on a video. Eagles did the same thing. Take It Easy registers incredibly high on this meter. So does Those Shoes, pulled the AA reading, off of their last album of this period, The Long Run. And the rest of it is a little bit scrambled, although you'll notice that the Hotel California stuff does tend to be able to go right to the top of the rating. But yeah, it's not quite this, so it's not guaranteed to tell you whether you have a hit record just by the sound of it without even knowing what any of the notes are or any of the lyrics or any of that. The meter is not that clever, but it did produce this, and it will tell you whether you're mixing stuff too bright or too dark, etc. And that's really kind of what I was hoping for. I didn't actually set out to be able to sort my Yes tracks by lifetime sales. That's not what I expected to be able to do. And yet, here we are. So, Meter is not one of my consolidated / standalone audio plugins. You have to go to the GitHub page and download it off of that, because it is using a graphic user interface based on Juice, and you'll see, if you install it, you'll see that it's flagged with something called PampleJuice. PampleJuice is the framework that I used in order to do that, and the person who develops the PampleJuice framework has been real helpful as far as helping me through making all of this work and getting this sort of what they call continuous integration development, where GitHub now hosts that stuff. If lots of people go and download it, it's completely fine. It's not going to hit my bandwidth for anything because it's all being hosted on GitHub for free because it's an open source project. I hope you like airwindows Meter. I've made some really big steps as far as being able to make it a lot better. It's also got more commentary on the actual display of it. Like it says things like which section is peak loudness, which section is slew brightness. The zero crest meter has 200 hertz, 40 hertz, and 20 hertz, which is the very bottom edge of it, labeled so that you can see what the bass is actually doing and where it's doing it. And the other side of the meter says blue loud, red bright, and green dark, which is what the dots are about. And hopefully, using that, it will help you do your mixing. If you have trouble running the meter plugin, first of all, if it's the wrong size, just try to resize it until it's the correct size again. It should take to resizing, sort of, but it's pretty much designed to be a basic size, and it's not as flexible with resizing as some of the stuff I'm working on. And yeah, I got a bunch of work to do because I've been told of a bug in Galactic 2, which I can fix, and so I am fixing. And it gave me an idea for maybe I could improve Galactic, which Galactic 2 was supposed to be. And so maybe next week we'll be able to see both the fix for Galactic 2 and Galactic 3 with some of the newest work that I've been doing, which will help it be a more spectacular sound, especially at high sample rates, but sort of just in general, because it'll also have that D-res thing that my recent reverbs use, which means it'll be galactic, but like intergalactic, and you'll be able to downsample it until the spaces that it produces are like unreasonably large, and that'll be fun. But until then, I hope you enjoy Meter. All this is supported by my Patreon, remember, and I'll get back to work. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.